Picture a high school football practice in late August, or a toddler trapped in a car seat on a hot afternoon. Both scenarios represent populations facing a condition with a mortality rate that can reach 63%. Heat exhaustion is characterized by dehydration and physical misery, but it stops short of the rapid systemic collapse seen in heat stroke. At this stage, the condition shifts from a manageable illness to a lethal medical emergency. This table shows the absolute diagnostic boundary between the two conditions: central nervous system dysfunction. If someone in the heat exhibits confusion, delirium, seizures, or slips into a coma, they have crossed a terrifying biological threshold. To understand why this happens, look at the hypothalamus, a small region in your brain that acts as the body's innate thermostat. It works constantly to maintain your core temperature within a strict daily range of 36 to 37.5 degrees Celsius. When an overwhelming environmental heat burden breaks that thermostat, the body loses its ability to dissipate heat. Instead of cooling down, it begins to cook its own cells, triggering a biological race against time. There are two main ways this breakdown occurs. Exertional heat stroke typically strikes young, otherwise healthy people, like athletes or military personnel, who generate massive amounts of metabolic heat that the environment cannot clear. In contrast, classic or non-exertional heat stroke is an environmental trap for vulnerable individuals who cannot escape the heat on their own, such as infants left in closed vehicles. This list shows the specific anatomical reasons children are at a severe disadvantage. They possess a higher body surface area to mass ratio, meaning they absorb heat from their environment much faster than adults, and they produce significantly less sweat per gland. Regardless of how the patient overheated, the body eventually hits a wall. As the core temperature pushes past 40 degrees Celsius, or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the primary cooling mechanism of sweat evaporation completely fails. Without the ability to evaporate sweat, the human body effectively becomes a closed, escalating oven. The heat has nowhere to go, accelerating a cascade of internal damage. This graph tracks the physiological reaction to extreme temperature elevation. Rising core temperature pairs with a dangerous spike in oxygen consumption and metabolic rate, eventually hitting the critical thermal maximum, the absolute biological red line for humans, estimated at 42 degrees Celsius. At this limit, a microscopic cellular crisis unfolds. Oxidative phosphorylation, how cells generate energy, uncouples. The intense heat causes vital proteins to twist, unfold, and lose their structure, destroying enzyme function. This cellular damage directly injures the vascular endothelium, the thin layer of cells lining your blood vessels. That injury triggers a massive, systemic inflammatory response cascade throughout the entire bloodstream. The results of this inflammatory cascade are catastrophic. The patient faces multi-organ failure, including severe liver damage, cerebral edema, dangerous swelling in the brain, and severe kidney failure, exacerbated by muscle tissue breakdown. Once the critical thermal maximum is breached, resting in the shade is no longer enough. Survival requires aggressive, immediate mechanical intervention to physically halt cellular death. Because the extent of organ damage correlates directly with the duration of hyperthermia, every passing minute counts. Cooling interventions must begin instantly, ideally before or concurrently with calling emergency medical services. For older teens and adults suffering exertional heat stroke, rapid cold water immersion is the pre-hospital gold standard. Submerging the patient quickly strips the heat away to drop their core temperature. This guideline shows a different protocol for children and hospital settings. Here, evaporative cooling is preferred. This involves stripping the patient, spraying them with water, and using high-flow fans to maximize air circulation. There is a vital clinical nuance to this technique. The water sprayed on the patient must be tepid, not freezing. If the water is too cold, the patient will begin to shiver, generating more metabolic heat and defeating the cooling effort. Medical teams continue this aggressive cooling until they hit a specific clinical endpoint, a core temperature of 38 degrees Celsius or 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Stopping at this mark stabilizes the patient without causing overshoot hypothermia. Even after the temperature drops, surviving heat stroke leaves a consequence known as heat intolerance. The patient's temperature homeostasis remains broken, leaving them highly vulnerable to repeated heat illness. Because of this vulnerability, the recovery rules are strict. Patients require total rest, followed by a gradual 10 to 14-day acclimatization period before returning to heat exposure, and they cannot resume physical activity without formal medical clearance. These emergencies are preventable through respecting heat index warnings, enforcing proper hydration, and ensuring children are never left unattended in vehicles. Heat stroke is a devastating biological cascade where survival is dictated by the clock. Recognizing the early signs of brain dysfunction and cooling the patient immediately are the only ways to halt the progression of organ failure and give the body a chance to recover.